Welcome back to the Broadcast Ops Playbook. The show is for teachers building student-led broadcast and media programs and trying to do it without chaos, burnout, or juggling 10 different tools. I'm your host, Taylor Siebert, and last episode we talked about getting students interested in your program and how to build buy-in that actually sticks. And I know a lot of you did that work. You have recruited, you've pitched, you've talked to students in the hallway, and you've gotten them to say yes to show up to events. But here's what we keep hearing say. They said yes, they showed up, they were excited, but I'm still doing everything myself. And we hear you. So that is what this episode is about. It's not how to get students interested, but what happens after they commit and they show up to the event and things still fall apart. Because buy-in is important, but it's not the finish line. So let's get into it. Hey, what's up, Hoosier? We made it to episode 3, and we are having a blast doing this. And I know you've been talking to a lot of teachers and students to start the semester here in 2026. I'd love for you to share some exciting things you've been talking to them about the last couple weeks.
Yeah, like you said, episode 3, we're rolling right along. Actually, it's fun to say that it's the start of the second semester, but it's also that we're recording this on the 29th. January's gone. We're 1/12 of the way through 2026, and so there's been a lot of conversations that have happened, and a lot of conversation around structuring student organization, student structure, and leadership within a classroom. We've had some very pointed discussions. No, small thanks to this. Talking about it really helps get some teachers to want to have that discussion. But also, we've been working with some programs that might not have the traditional structure in place yet. That they're doing a lot of great things, and now we're just trying to get them back on track. And I think that's really cool. I've been able to talk with both teachers and then connect with those students. And I had a one-on-one call, well, one on many because there were like 9 kids on the other side of the Zoom call, but it was really fun to just get to talk with them and get their perspective about it too.
I love it. What are teachers telling you, in regards to our topic today? They say yes. What happens after that? What have you been hearing from teachers and over the time you've been helping teachers grow their programs?
Well, yeah, I think teachers say yes, and then maybe they don't have the plan fully flushed out, and I get that. And as we're going through this podcast, we've kind of set this up to slowly unlock one piece after another. So don't take the first 2 episodes and try to build your program off of that. Keep coming back, keep listening, because we're slowly unlocking pieces, and this is one of them. I think when students say yes and then they show up, um, if they don't have the clear guidelines on what to do, what pieces of equipment they need to run, there's no expectations, then you as a teacher still have a lot of work to do, right? You still probably are setting up the gear. You are explaining the roles to a person almost every single time. Like raise your hand virtually, however you want to do it. I know this is a podcast, but if you find yourself repeating the same instructions to the student multiple times, this episode's for you. We're gonna help address how you can have that not happen, because it's a reality. It was a reality for me as a student. I had to remind myself a lot of the things that I needed to do, and I've worked with a lot of teachers who tell me, "Man, I just keep repeating the same things, and it's not sticking." We've got ways to make it stick.
Yeah, it's just not sustainable, and it's not what student led is supposed to look like. And we get it. We do events, and it's hard. It's hard work to explain to a bunch of people, what to do on game night when it hits. And so we're going to break down. We're going to talk about why or what, excuse me, the kind of the real problem is, why, and then the what, the how, what to do about it. And we've got 4 steps that we're going to break down for you. So stay with us here as we get through this, because it's really important, because we understand a lot of programs, like we said, You've got a bunch of kids interested. You've got that adrenaline rush from that first couple of events. Admin is excited about what you're doing, and then you're like, "Oh boy, what do we do next?" And that's the pattern that we've seen over the decade plus that we've been doing this, and we understand that. Yeah, students sign up excited first couple events, but then they need constant reminders. Things come up. Maybe you asked them 2 months ago, can they help on this specific night? They forgot. And then they show up and they ask, well, what do I do? And the teacher handles all the setup and prep. And the broadcast only happens because you made it happen. And that is not sustainable. So, Hoosier, my question for you is how often do you see teachers describe their program as me doing it with students helping instead of students running it with me coaching, which is really hard?
Yeah, it is. I was doing some rough math in my head. Just we don't have an official number of schools that work with us, but at least 50% or more. And I pick up on this by just the way that the teachers talk about their program. They might not even be specifically giving me a yes, I feel this way, but just listening to them talk when it's I have to do this, I have to do that. Instead of a we have to do that or my students are going to take care of that, that little language can even clue me into like, okay, you're still managing a lot of the workload, and that's in the beginning gonna have to happen, but we want to put the systems in place to make it not happen, right? There's going to be times where you just got to power through, but it's like we said, sustainability is the goal, and that happens by having a system in place.
Have you seen teachers hit that exact moment where they realize, wait, I'm still doing everything?
Yeah, the moment usually happens when life happens, right? There will be a point where a teacher has something come up in their life outside of school, outside of, leading the broadcast program that they're not able to be there. That's usually the tipping point. That's one of the biggest ones we see because life happens. You balance a lot as a teacher, even within the classroom. You balance a lot, not to throw in personal life too. And so usually that happens, and a common term that gets thrown around is burnout. It'll present itself like burnout, but you just realize you're doing so much, and you sit there and you say, "I need to call someone," and the teacher calls me, and they say, "What do I do?" And I'm like, "Here's the turning point. The good news is we can put stuff in place to make it not feel this way, but we got to work through it, and we got to get those systems in place." And yeah, it's pretty usually pretty obvious when they're kind of burned out.
Yeah, I just had a teacher. We just put out a, you know, kind of an audit form and had a teacher that, is doing 5+ events a week on average, 20+ students. And he listed out just 12 tasks that he's doing kind of on to prepare for a broadcast or those events throughout the week. And that's the gap. And, sometimes you feel like, man, I don't even know how to get started and get students doing this. And that's because you don't even know where to start. There's no system that's been built yet. And so getting students to say yes is like exciting, but then you're like, where do I even put them? What do I even have them do? So highly encourage you. We'll put a link to that post. We can generate a report for you and show you kind of because sometimes you don't know it when you're doing it, and we both deal with that on the business side as well. Of like, auditing our time. We've got everything on our calendar to kind of look at that, and so we're trying to encourage teachers to do that because the day is chaotic. You got kids coming at you all day long, and it's just not sustainable to be able to do the things that you want to do like this. It's a clarity problem. It's not a motivation problem when you're trying to get students to commit to these roles. And so there's got to be structure in place. So that's kind of the problem with doing all these things. And you've got live streaming, broadcasts, you've got podcasts, you've got video board, like all these things that are happening in the school, and you're all responsible for it. And so we'll break down how you can kind of get other people involved in that because it's a load. And Hoosier, you just talked to a teacher the other day of like the weight. You could see the weight lifted off her shoulders when we said, "Hey, we can help you. We're on your team." Because she felt like she was on an island and she was doing waking up, coming to school 2 hours early just to prep for their daily broadcast, and that's exhausting. So back to students saying yes, and you know then getting them to actually show up and do the work. Saying yes, typically we found from students is an emotional decision. Like, yeah, sure, I'll come help, and then they forget about it. But actually doing the work is the operational part, and so the core issue that's the core issue that we've found when getting students involved. They can genuinely be excited about the program and they can say they're all in, but then they really don't maybe know what they're supposed to do, when to do it, and how to do it really well. So, why do you think there's such a gap in programs like this between enthusiasm and follow through? And it's probably not just with broadcast programs, but that's our focus here on this show.
Well, yeah. I think just throwing in one quick other thing on why they might say yes initially. We talked about it last episode, those incentives. Hey, if you're given free food, there's a lot of people I know that'll show up for free food. And that's why we talked, especially last episode, they're fine, but don't rely on them, right? Because then you get students that are like this. And so if we can solve that problem sooner rather than later, um, that helps. But I think one of the things is um, students still need the guidance. So so none of this when we talk about getting students to buy in, commit, run the broadcast, none of it means it's not without adult supervision, right? None of it means you as the teacher are completely leaving. But they need those expectations. They need to know why they're doing it. And so if you can say, "Hey, you're my announcer. Here's what I expect from you. I expect you to be professional, to ask the coaches how to pronounce the names correctly, to represent our school in a positive manner." You can go through and I'm just creating this checklist off the top of my head of things that I do, and things that I've told other people to do. And so there's great long lists and can be overwhelming to students as well. But start out and list your core principles of what does our broadcast program announcer look like? That way that student knows the role that they're stepping into. Hey, I need to do all of this. Great. Now they can feel confident in it, and that'll help maybe not scare them away. Because I think sometimes teachers too are like, man, there's so much going on. Am I scaring students away? And we don't want to do that. We don't want to leave them on an island and not properly prepare them. But we also, don't want to underprepare them or over prepare them so much that they're freaking out and they're like, am I going to remember everything that was just told to me? Right. And so there's a fine balance.
Yeah, I think what you're describing, and you would agree with this, is standards. What's our standard each time we hit live? And so when students understand that, there's a few things happening here. First, students need to know what success looks like. Looks like what is that standard? Not, hey, we're just helping out tonight, or be ready, but exactly what their role requires of them in that standard. And you're coming off some feedback from some community members giving you feedback on an announcer. So I can tell you're adding those things from an announcer standpoint, and that's why we're building broadcast ops is so that teachers can have that kind of checklist and support and those standards for students to go through. Now, getting them to do that is also a challenge. We understand that we're not naive to say that. Yeah, it's like pulling teeth sometimes to get students to understand that, but show them what success looks like, and then let them dive into that. And second, there's got to be a shared understanding of not, hey, everyone just assumes someone else is going to have it handled or wait to be told, right? That's part of that ownership piece of students. And then third, sometimes the teacher tends to, and I do this as a business owner, so I'm just being fully transparent of it's a lot easier for me just to do it than for me to say and ask Hoosier and explain to Hoosier, hey, could you help me build this? It's a lot more mental effort for me to do that. But so we tend to just go, well, I'll just do it. And we fill the gap. And so what ends up happening is that's then when burnout happens and things stack on top of each other and you look at your list of things you have to do, each day. And it's just like, I can't do this anymore. And you want it to work. So you step in. And so that what ends up happening is that reinforces the expectation to the students that you will always step in and that they aren't capable of maybe solving the problems. So when we do our broadcast for state events, as we're really head down on that and building and preparing for that, we've learned a ton. We've almost been doing this 10 years now. Hoosier, I would love for you to share how we think about those three things that I just mentioned, which we're not perfect at. But we're getting better.
Right. Oh, 100%. And a core philosophy of my life is to get better every day, right? And so I'm constantly learning, reviewing what have I done. And especially now as we are getting closer to state basketball, I've spent a lot of time like, okay, I now personally have been leading the operations of the tournament for the last 2, 3 years. I've been involved for the last 4 or 5, starting as a student now on the production lead side. And I think part of what we try to do is we try to give our students trainings and we try to pull examples from a broadcast that a crew did a very, very good job on, right? And we break it down and we show them, hey, here's the camera angle we wanted you to match. This is what we want to show up. Uh, we want you to be just right above the shot clock on the top. If you're the floor camera, we want you standing here. We want you there for starting lineups. What's your location on the floor? How do you? We go down to even the expectations of how do you behave because they're not only representing their school, but now they're representing us, and more specifically, me and Taylor. Right? They're representing us and the work that we're doing to give high school kids a chance to broadcast at a state championship level. And so that's a lot of the things when we try to show them what success looks like. Um, you know, the understanding is, yes, you're going to show up to that broadcast, and because it's our gear, it's going to be set up, right? But I think the expectation is still you are responsible for the camera that you're running. You're responsible for the headset you're talking into. If you're the director, you're responsible for that machine. You need to do a check. It's kind of a checklist, and I always go back to like the airline industry because I'm kind of an enthusiast too too much so at times, and it's like every pilot, even though the mechanics have all checked the plane, the pilot who's in control still does the walk around, still goes through the pre-flight checklist every single time. So those students, I tell them, you have your checklist now. And it's something that we're really, really hounding this year. You have your checklist. I expect you to go through it to make sure that your camera is going to operate the way that you expect it to. That way, when they blow the whistle and they throw the ball up in the air, we're not like, oh no, camera doesn't work. I don't want to be chasing around problems because I end up usually being the one that has to solve them because it's our gear. And so if I can have them tell me that there's a problem 30 minutes before the game instead of 3 seconds, I enjoy that a lot better.
Exactly. If a student doesn't know where to meet or what to bring, when to arrive, or even what camera operator actually means in terms of the tasks and checklists, they're going to stand there and wait for instructions. That's just the way, young people are built most of the time. And it's not because they don't care, it's because the system hasn't been built yet. And so we're really excited to really for our productions take that next step so we can model that to schools and do that. We're going to be using broadcast ops at state basketball. If you're here in a Nebraska school that typically helps with that, we're building that all into one system, which is going to be really, really exciting. So before we get to the how and the four steps, I want to kind of address the hard truth when the teacher is the operating system, when they are the ones doing everything and the program can't really run without them. What happens to a program when the teacher misses one game that you've seen? You've seen both sides.
I have. Um, on the one side, if there is a teacher who has been the one responsible for setting everything up, um, what usually happens is the students get the gear and they take one look at it and they're like, I don't know what to do. Or I think this goes here. This is from photo memory. I can kind of remember it being like this. And if they're lucky, and a lot of kids are technologically savvy, I mean, the equipment we're dealing with isn't, too complicated. So usually they can figure it out, but it takes them a lot longer than it would have if they had instructions and stuff listed out. On the other hand, on the other side of the coin, the side that we want to get all of our programs to, you have a teacher like Trey Perry from McCool Junction here in Nebraska that we work with who, lucky for him, his wife, they were expecting another child. So when the child was born, he was able to leave on paternity leave for, what was it, like a month?
1 month.
Oh,
Yeah.
an entire
Incredible.
month, and his students not only, and I mean, this is how much Trey has modeled our system, and we pull ideas from him because he's actually in the classroom doing it. Not only was his broadcast, completely student ran, they knew how everything went, they had very few questions, but also the classroom. Even though that there was a substitute teacher sitting in the class, he still had those student leaders who said, "Hey, I'm in charge of making sure everyone's scheduled for streaming. Let's go through that list. Are you all still good to show up? Great. Yearbook, do we have all the stuff?" So even outside of just the actual broadcast itself, that organization and the leadership roles and the expectations were upheld in the class as well. And again, all with him being gone for a month.
Yep. And we actually have a conversation that we recorded here on our YouTube channel. If you're watching this, we can link to as well on the show notes. Okay, Hooge, let's talk about what to do about it and how this all works. What to actually do, because it isn't really complicated. It just has to be intentional in how you do it. And I'll be very upfront. This is not a sales pitch by any means, but a lot of these things we've already built. And so if you want to work with us, we're happy to share these things so you don't have to recreate the wheel. I think that's what a lot of teachers struggle with, is like, I don't know anything about broadcasting. I'm a math teacher or a PE teacher, or yeah, I've kind of self-taught, but I need some support. Like, that's why we're doing this. That's why we're here to help you guys. So when you think about each of these steps, we've done a lot of this, the legwork already, and that's why we're sharing it in this format for you, is to help you out. So step one, and this one specifically we have built out, is defining what each role actually does. It's not camera operator, but camera operator arrives 30 minutes before game time, checks battery, and if you record SD cards, you set the white balance, you frame the shots according to the shot list, you know who the key players are, and you're communicating with the director during the game if it's a multicam. So that's not just camera operator. There's multiple things that are working in that plays a very important role. So I'd love to ask you, Hooge, what's the difference between a vague role and a clear one in terms of how a student shows up to that role?
Yeah, I think we've said part of it already. So we'll double down on it, which is what I like to do. Teachers will love me for saying that because there is the repetition idea to get students to learn. Um, a vague role, a student, you know, I have had some opportunities in life as a student where um, I have had, even if it's just a class activity that was explained as do this, and I'm like, okay, let's define what this is. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what you want, or let's even, because me and Taylor have this fun banter back and forth. Even though he's my boss, there will be times that Taylor says, "Hey, I need you to do this." I'm like, okay. My head goes a million different ways. How do you want me to do it? What specifically are you looking for? If you give me specifics, I can get you what you want. And I
You
think
mean
that's really the core
you
of it.
don't just understand all my ideas in my head?
Not off the bat. We've been
Oh,
working
man.
together for a while, but it, it's I've gotten a lot better. Sometimes you'll word it one way and I'll be like, okay, I really do think he meant it this other way, so I'll do it the way that I assume. And it turns out that I'm right more often than not. But I've kind of learned how to speak Taylor without actually speaking Taylor.
And
Um,
there's no AI tool that can do that.
no, no. AI tool is the tool I turn to that say, I wish Taylor would tell me this, how it would actually make sense to me, and then I leave that in my AI notes and in my journal and say, "Come on, Taylor." But no, but you can see that there are times, even in a real business, where you have to set those expectations very clearly, because your students, and we love our students, we love people. Sometimes we want to show the people that are in the position of leadership that we know what we're doing, and will fail to ask questions. This is opening. I am opening up to you guys here. There are times where I am so hard headed and I think that I'm really good at my job that I won't ask a question because I think it's going to show that I don't know what I'm doing. What it really actually shows is that I'm not willing to clarify, and I'm not willing to try to do it the right way. And so I've gotten a lot better about asking if I really don't understand it, saying, "Hey, I need a little bit more on this. I need a little bit more guidance." Because it doesn't show that you're not good at your job. It shows that you actually care about your job. And your students are the same way. They're probably not going to ask a question. They're just going to try to figure it out because they want to show you that they're capable of it. But and they don't want to seem like they don't understand it the first time. But we all know that sometimes it's really hard to pick things up on the first time or the second time or the third time. And so I think there's a level to that where you need to understand that with your students, that if they're not asking a question, and they don't get a very clear expectation of their role, it's going to be really tough for them to really show up.
Yep.
I'm getting a
If
call.
the role is fuzzy, they wait, and if the role is clear, they act. And so that's step 1, right? Defining what each role actually does. Step 2, and we've done this, we're creating these for our teachers right now, is to create pre-event checklists for each role. So every role should have a repeatable checklist. Again, just like the pilot for the airline, love that analogy. Equipment, setup, communication, shutdown, packing everything up. If they can follow that without asking you, they're learning the system, and you are not the system anymore. Have you seen what happens when a teacher introduces checklists for the first time? Hoosh?
Yeah, so there's a couple examples, but the one, it was kind of a setup checklist, and I wasn't there, but I got the story, told back to me. It was a checklist that I had created for how the multi-camera setup would go, and I look back at that diagram. I need to work on it. My artsy skills were not great at the time, but it got the job done. But uh, we had someone go deliver that gear and hand, the students, say, "All right, here's all your gear. Here's how it all plugs in." And the teacher and just stood back, and the students all set it up, and it all worked. It was all correct, and the students like, "Oh my goodness, we just set that up," and all it was just a diagram. It was little, images with lines drawn to it, and that's that. Start simple. Start with that. That's all it takes. It doesn't have to look like, an architect's building schematic, right? We're not on that level. We just need something that the high schoolers or middle school students that you have are looking at and can understand how the equipment gets set up, or they can understand, especially when you're doing like listing job roles. Don't use a $10 word when a $1 word will
Hmm.
do the trick. Don't try to complicate the language. Very clear terms. And I see this. I've been able to, there's some manuals out there from large production companies, that we've been able to find that have just been on the internet. When you look for stuff, you typically can find it, thanks to
Someone
AI and
created it,
Google.
right? Someone's created
Someone
something.
created it. It's there. And looking at it, I'm like, man, this language is very simplistic. Like I fully understand everything, and I'm not a professional camera operator, right? I don't do ESPN broadcasts, and yet I can understand the language because they need their people to understand it and not have any questions.
And I think I struggle with this sometimes. It feels like you're micromanaging, and that's really not what it is. In this case, hopefully, The goal is, the vision is that this is giving students path to independence within that role by giving them the checklist. It's just a starting point of things that need to be done, and within that, they can, have fun being camera operator and finding new, angles and new ways to share that story for the broadcast or announcer, all the different roles. So we've built those out, and excited. We're building that into broadcast ops for you to have that queued up for students to be able to pull up on their phone and go through those checklists before the game. Okay, step 3 is setting, we talked about this, setting standards, not just tasks. So it's not enough, we don't believe, to just say, be ready to go for the game. You need to define ready, like we talked about, arriving 30 minutes before the game or whenever you ask students to be there to start. Equipment has always tested before tip off. We always suggest to test the day before if you have a class opportunity to do that, or sometime during the day. Checking audio is really important, especially if you've got comms headsets with your camera operators and director, making sure your streaming credentials are all correct and you've tested that, making sure you have internet connection, or else you will not be able to stream. Always one of the first things I do, even when we go into Pinnacle Bank Arena, what's our upload speed? It's ingrained in me to do that because I've had so many times where, yeah, internet just didn't come through, and we've got some horror stories on that. I'm not trying to bring those up for you, Hoosh, but why does having a standard change how students prepare?
Yeah. Um, one of my favorite quotes, and I've not fully read the book, so don't get mad at me, but
Me neither.
uh,
We talked about that.
the book is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Clearly, I need to build the atomic habit of reading maybe a page of the book each day, and by the end of the year, maybe I'll have it all read. Uh, but the quote is, "You do not rise to the level of your goals; you fall to the level of your systems or your standards." I think that really plays into here of like, yes, you can have all your students say, you know, we want to do a cool broadcast, but if they don't know what that looks like, they don't know what that means, they're never going to get there. But if you can say, hey, a great broadcast is this. All of the cameras worked. Our director switched the cameras on cue. We weren't switching back and forth between the main angle and the secondary angles in the middle of a play. If we had replay, they were being brought in smooth. Like going back to the announcers, the audio is clear. Like if they know that and the announcers know, hey, I'm expected to even have a couple key players to talk about. Well, let's not wait till game time to figure out who our key players are. Let's do some advanced scouting. Scouting is not just for coaches; it's for broadcast announcers as well. Look at the roster, look at the stats, and try to figure out who might, who has been scoring the most per game. That's usually a player to watch, especially in basketball because games are won by who has the most points. And so, if there's a player who can score the most, they're probably somebody to watch. If there's someone who's getting a bunch of rebounds, that could be a storyline. Now, my dad's a basketball coach. I understand the game of basketball on a pretty cool level, and so that would always be something I would be like, all right, this guy's been getting a bunch of rebounds. Now, how's that applicable to the audience? Well, Grandma at home's listening, and she's like, I don't. Why does it matter how many rebounds? Well, if they're offensive, they're getting more opportunities to get a second chance at the bucket. Anyway, I could go into a whole thing about that. But that's what your student announcers could be like if they prepare, if they have all of that. And so, yes, having a standard then makes them feel like, hey, I need to put in more effort ahead of time. Or it helps them recognize I'm not at this level, preferred level. What are the areas I need to work on? And then they can seek out resources either on their own or through us or through their teacher.
When students know the standard, then they know where to meet it, right? The expectations for that. And when it's vague, they're just going to wait for you to tell them, is that, if that's good enough or not. So one of the things we provide as well is a production analysis. And I know, Hoosier, you just did one of those this morning for one of our schools, is to watch a portion of the broadcast and provide feedback. So, understanding what the standard is for your program and then providing some feedback to your students. is absolutely a joy for us, and I know Hoosier enjoys doing those. So if you work with us, you're listening to this, please send us some clips. If you don't, and you'd like to have the opportunity of that, please get a hold of us, and we can share more. So last step, and we'll kind of wrap things up. This is a great episode. This is probably the hardest one. We talked about it already. Of stop filling the gaps immediately. Absolutely the hardest thing you can do. If a student forgets something, you got to maybe let it go. If the task doesn't get done how you think it should, let the consequences be felt. Not to punish them, but for them to understand ownership. That's the only way they're going to grow and the real weight of their responsibilities. And I'll share Jordan Burns actually shared an example with us of that where a student missed an ad spot and the sponsor let him know that because they were watching. And so he actually did a call with the sponsor and the students to have them feel the pain of missing that ad spot. And he goes, and I played it up a little bit for the kids to feel that a little bit more with the sponsor. And he was like, yeah, I understand. Like these are kids, but we're paying for this. But what an incredible opportunity. And he could have stepped in and tried to save the day there, but he let that kind of settle and use it as a learning opportunity, which is really, really hard to do. Um, but how do teachers usually react when you tell them to stop saving everything?
Well, they think I'm crazy at first. That's usually I usually get an odd look, like, "Wait, so you want things to go wrong?" Um, no, in an ideal world, I would not like things to go wrong. Like you said, I would love everything to go perfectly. Um, I would love if I was watching the college, football championship game that they didn't have a weird audio echo, but the professionals did, and I'm sure somebody on Monday had a very lovely meeting with their manager, and it was like, "Why in the world did this happen?" Um, but nothing can be truly learned without experiencing getting it wrong, right? You think about all of the great inventions in the world. How many light bulbs were created before we got the one we have now? Um, you think about all the times, how many rockets did, Elon Musk or even NASA for that matter, when they were trying to the race them, how many times did we try and fail? And that's okay. And I think in this day and age, especially to continue to communicate to the students, hey, while we don't want you to just fail because you're allowed to fail, that's not what we want you to do. If you do make a mistake, it's okay. Figure out how to rise above it, how to fix it, how to move beyond it. And trying to explain to teachers that not only are you teaching them a great lesson about broadcasting, you're teaching them a real good life lesson that things are going to happen that aren't going to work out for them. And they're going to have to figure out what to do. They're going to have to figure out a next step. And so, again, I teachers look at me funny. I say, yes, you're going to have to let it fail. And honestly, like, if the announcers are not doing great and the audience, have some feedback, find a way to gently tell them or tell me what the feedback was and then put me on a Zoom call with your students and I will happily tell them what the audience has said. I don't really pull my punches when I talk to people just because that's the way I am. I think everyone can learn. And so yeah, it is an odd suggestion, especially when the expectation might be, we got to have this perfect because we're serving the community. And if we start messing up, maybe they're not going to, continue to fund us and give us money. But you also have to explain to them it's a learning opportunity for the students. You know, I think like, how do you rank it? Learning opportunity or official product of the school? It's kind of like the basketball team. I mean, yes, we all want our basketball team to win, but sometimes they're going to fail in the way of losing the game, not scoring enough points, and that's okay. We're not we're not pulling basketball funding because we lose one game, right? They're not going to pull broadcast funding because one camera operator accidentally left the camera pointed at the sky and we switched to it for 5 seconds. Now we don't want that to constantly happen, so fix it, but yes.
Yeah. You've got to shrink that safety net. It takes time in order for students' ownership to grow in that. It doesn't mean you're abandoning them in the broadcast, right? It's just kind of it's you're truly the coach. It means you're trusting the system and letting them grow inside of it. So, but who's what changes when the system works? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some great visible signs that it's working. Um, if you are currently having to text a reminder to your students that there's a game the next day, um, that is probably something that should be fixed. Um, if the system's working, they already have it on their calendar. They've had it in their schedule for a while. They've already been, preparing for their role. Like if they're just being reminded about it the day of or the day before, they've had no time to prepare, right? And so if you're truly following this, they're preparing. They've got their checklist. They're going through those steps. Um, it also the system is working when you're not setting up the equipment. Now you can still help. There's nothing against that. If a student says, "Hey, I am going to have to not show up right away because I can't get a ride, right away," that's fine. Again, make sure it's not a repeat thing, but let your students set up that gear. Hand them a checklist and a diagram and say, "Here's how this needs set up," and let them follow instructions. One of the biggest life skills that anyone can have is how to follow instructions. It helps in a lot of things. Um, and then, sometimes when the broadcast is over, we just dust our hands off and pack up and walk home or go home. But what if we had a little debrief in the end of each game to where we say, all right, check in with everyone. My director, how were your camera cuts? Were they clean? Did we show the action? Did we stay on the main cam for the play and then do our cuts and show extra with the secondary cameras? Yes? Cool. Very good. Replay. Did we get some clean stuff there? Announcers, how were we talking? Were we professional? Doing a debrief like that, saying, hey, we actually did a really good job instead of, oh, we did it. We're done. Goodbye. Right? Let's do a little reflection.
Yeah. And I think when you start to hear, because we've kind of seen this in some programs, when you start to hear students asking other students questions. So I've seen this at Johnson County Central with Marcus. Marcus is running around doing some different things, and students were asking others. That's instead of asking you, that's when you know that you're not the operating system anymore. They are part of it. And it's not just you, which is really, really great. Okay. So we've gone through a lot and kind of want to reset. If you're feeling this right now, if your program is stuck in this place where you just don't even know where to go, you've got kids excited, but you're still doing everything. Don't ask, how do I motivate them to get more excited? Ask, do they know what their job actually is? Do I have a checklist they can follow without me holding their hand? Are my standards clear or vague? And would this survive if I didn't remind anyone? Those are some really great questions to ask yourself. So, my question to you, Hooj, is what's one thing a teacher could do this week to start building this structure? Where would you say to start?
Yeah. If you don't have those rules and expectations, I think they're one in the same. They're it's a one-page document. Here's the role, here's the expectation for the role. I was actually thinking about this too. Thought of a cool phrase and I'm now gonna take as my own.
Ooh, debut.
And tell this one, Taylor, I have not told you, so you
Yeah,
can't jump in
yeah,
and
you
steal
didn't
it
share
before
this.
me. But I actually did kind of pull it from. So you had that kind of the time audit thing that you were talking
Oh,
about,
yeah, yeah.
and as I was looking at it, and they were talking about, do our students signing up ahead of time, like for you as a teacher listening to this, there are some teachers who are like, oh, whoever shows up, we'll go with it, and they think that that's easier than saying, no, this is your role. You are my camera person this year. They think that that's just easier to roll with the flow. I would be terrified when we do state basketball. I would need to know that this is the student that's in this role, not here's who's, here's my 8 kids and we'll fill in somewhere. No, I need to know that you have ran camera all year and that you know what you're doing. And this isn't, the state champion tournament is not the first time that you are running a camera. And so as a teacher, that's why I would want you to start with roles, expectations, and then identify your student and your backup student, your primary student, backup student, and put them in those roles. We're not limiting their learning. Some people are just really good at running camera, and they might say, I want to direct, throw them on a JV or junior high game, and then 9 times out of 10, it won't go as well as they liked it, and they like comfortability, and so they'll go back to running camera because they don't want to be pushed out of their comfort zone. And so, like I said, that's the new phrase. It's scarier to say, we're just going to go with whoever shows up than it is to put people in a role and have a backup in place if you need it.
Yep. So pick one role that you want to define. We can help you with that. Write down exactly what it does from your perspective, from arrival to cleanup or shutdown, and make it so specific that a student could follow without asking you a single question. That is your starting point. If students said yes, if they are showing up, that's real progress. But now you've seen the gap. Buy-in is the beginning, but it's not the end. Students need more than motivation, and they need clarity, structure, and a system they can operate within without you being the hub of every single decision. I am at fault of this and running a business as well. I'm right alongside you guys. So here's what's to come next. You've defined roles, you've built checklists, but now students are doing their roles and some aren't. How do you hold them accountable without turning into a micromanager you were trying to avoid? That is episode 4, and we will see you on the next one.